What's up, y'all? My name is JR, and for those of you who don't already know, I'm a huge movie and TV nerd. If you're new here, I appreciate you taking time to check out my channel. I hope you'll consider sticking around and joining the film community I'm trying to build here on YouTube. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about a film that's kind of taking Netflix by storm right now, a film produced by Higher Ground Productions, the Obama's production company, Leave the World Behind. And just so you guys know, this video will contain some mild spoilers, so if you haven't had a chance to watch this movie yet and you don't want to know anything that happens in it, you might want to exit this video right now. And with that being said, no more wasting time, let's get into it. So, Leave the World Behind is an American apocalyptic psychological thriller film produced, written, and directed by Sam Esmail. It's based on a 2020 novel of the same name by Myha'la. And the film stars Julia Roberts, Myha'la Ali, Ethan Hawke, and Myha'la, as well as Kevin Bacon, as they attempt to make sense of the gradual breakdown in technology which points to a potential cataclysm. Now, this movie had its world premiere at the AFI Fest on October 25th, 2023. It was released in select theaters on November 22nd of 2023, before finally making its way to Netflix on December 8th, 2023. And the film has received generally positive reviews from critics who felt that the cast performances made up for some of the shortcomings in the film's story and its pacing. Now, at the time of the making of this video, the movie has a 75% on Rotten Tomatoes, and that is based on 138 critic reviews, with a much lower audience score of 34%, based on over 5,000 verified ratings. The film has a Metascore of 68 on Metacritic, and that's based on 35 critic reviews, with a user score of 4.6 based on almost 157 user ratings. And finally, it has a 6.5 out of 10 on IMDb, and that's based on almost 100,000 reviews. So, when Barack and Michelle Obama first partnered with Netflix in order to launch Higher Ground Productions, it was widely reported that they cited the movie Get Out as the kind of film that they were interested in making. So, in other words, the Obamas kind of wanted it known that they had something to say, but also that they weren't necessarily interested in producing what's called cinematic homework. And I'm sure that's why they were probably more than excited to join forces with Sam Esmail in producing the company's latest project, Leave the World Behind. And it's more than clear almost immediately that this film was meant to draw heavily from Jordan Peele's brand of filmmaking, using horror tropes to make unambiguously progressive points about a myriad of social topics, and in this case, civil unrest. Adapted by Rumaan Alam's 2020 novel of the same name, Leave the World Behind tells the story of an affluent Brooklyn couple with a very relatable problem. They're sick and tired of people. And after months about stressing about their jobs, Amanda, who's played by Roberts, and Clay, who's played by Hawke, decide that they need a relaxing weekend away with their two kids. But their first night at the Long Island vacation rental takes a weird turn when George, played by Ali, a suave, well-dressed man who claims he owns the house, shows up with his daughter Ruth, played by Harold, asking to spend the night in the basement. Apparently, New York City has experienced a blackout that prevents him from taking the elevator up to his high-rise apartments, so he claims that he had no choice but to retreat to his vacation home. Now, Amanda thinks it's an unreasonable request, but Clay seems more receptive to the pair, and after a lot of back and forth between the two, they ultimately agree to let them stay the night. Now, when they wake up, the blackout is still in effect. Internet and cell phone service is still non-existent, so it's impossible to get updates on all the strange occurrences taking place. And after a while, it becomes increasingly clear that something very bad is happening. Now, as for the two families have to work together to figure out what that is, despite having no real reason to trust each other besides simple proximity. And we begin to see all the ways in which truly dire circumstances tend to erode our capacity for pleasantries and kind of force people to reveal their true colors. So I'll start with the positive here. Sam Esmail seems to understand the general mechanics of your typical post-apocalyptic film So there is a familiarity there that makes you feel at ease. But he does some things here that succeed in taking a lot of that away fairly quickly and, in the process, help make the film stand apart. Now, there are lots of interesting choices made with respect to shot selection and camera movement. I mean, I feel like the jib operator deserved time and a half, like for real, on this one. But all the grandiose camera movements come off like a smug attempt to keep you engrossed for the film's marathon 141-minute runtime. Now, the music soundtrack was extremely interesting. In fact, it's one of the first things I noticed while watching this film. The Revenge by Joey Badass pushes the opening credits through to completion, and by the time Never Gonna Let You Go by Blackstreet begins to play about 8 minutes in, I have to admit, I began to wonder who the music supervisor on the film was. It was Maggie Phillips, by the way. Shout out. The film does a pretty good job of turning the end of the world as we know it into essentially a stage play. Mostly because the 4 adult characters involved in the story are extremely well written. George, again, is a well-dressed financial advisor who manages wealth for some of the most powerful people on earth and has no reason to doubt his understanding of the way the world really works. Now, Amanda, though nuanced, is essentially the entitled white woman who's jaded by her job in ad sales and seems more than willing to lash out at any and everyone, except her kids, that is. And, maybe her husband a little bit, but, And, on top of that, she might be just a little bit racist. I don't know if it was meant for her to come off that way, but she certainly did. Now, Clay is an exceedingly optimistic college professor who seems to enjoy the luxury of being able to maintain his overly positive view of humanity while spending his days immersing himself in esoteric debates that are of no real consequence when you really think about it. And Ruth is a street-smart Gen Z college grad whose wealthy upbringing seems to have allowed her to spend a great time doing absolutely nothing except studying human nature, especially when it comes to racial and gender dynamics, without ever having a real reason to apply anything she might have learned from having done so. Now, over the course of the film, these 4 characters play off of each other as the film seeks to be a commentary on what should and shouldn't really matter in the face of societal collapse. And, as a side note, as it pertains to the characters we got here, I think I personally would have preferred George's wife to have been an active part in this narrative instead of having her be abroad and, basically only taking part in the story by way of being mentioned by George and Ruth and how they assumed that she was probably dead because of everything that was going on. But I mean, we can't always get what we want in these situations, right? Anyway, the acting in the film was very good, made possible by the fantastic group of actors that were selected for the cast, especially the main 4. And, speaking of the cast, Beth Bowling and Susie Ferris definitely deserve a shout out for the job they did as casting directors. I heard, a lot of people who mentioned that, Denzel was originally supposed to play the role of George before filmmakers ultimately settled on Ali, but I mean, my man does have 2 Oscars, so it's all the same if you ask me. Anyway, the performing prowess of the actors they were able to assemble for this film, almost make up for the film's shortcomings. And, though there were a few, there were a couple of really big ones. Now, the biggest being that I think the film relied way too heavily on tension to see it through. And, as you watch each chapter of the film, made very noticeable by the announcement of each chapter as it arrived, to the point where it made you stop the movie to kind of see how many chapters there might actually be before you got to the end, which I think is something in and of itself. But I think, mostly you spend the overwhelming majority of the film wondering exactly what the hell is going on. And I think that, that's good at the beginning of a movie, but once you get about halfway, I think you got to start revealing, what's happening. I think in films like this one, like I said, eventually you have to see the boogeyman, whoever or whatever that may be. And the fact that we don't get that here, despite Esmail claiming that he opted for the controversial ending, hoping to invoke conversation, still leaves you with a bad taste in your mouth for sure. And if you expected that because the film is almost 2.5 hours, that the main character's arc would be wrapped up in a nice tidy bow by the end, I hate to be the bearer of bad news on that front because it doesn't happen. And I think when you make a choice like that, you leave the audience to depend solely upon the film's thesis or theme. Here being that we as Americans have to find a way in a time where we are as divided as we've ever been to overcome our differences and make efforts towards reunification, before it's too late. Now, all things considered, Leave the World Behind, it's a film with its highs and its lows just like any other. And despite the fact that the film's low points can border on nonsensical, the film does manage to be entertaining, throughout the entirety of its runtime. And through the family's conversations about their lives and work, Esmail is able to touch on a wide variety of societal ills, ranging from first world inconveniences to absolutely catastrophic threats. And again, he not only fails to wrap any of these storylines up for the main characters, but he seems to relish in the fact that the looming end of the world pretty much absolves him from even having to do so. Despite that fact, I think his ambition is genuinely commendable here. And, towards the end of the film, Ali's George talks about the possibility of a disruptive 3-stage maneuver executed by harmful state actors or any one of America's geopolitical rivals in order to destabilize the country by speaking the words that I think perfectly sum up the point of this entire film. And he states, the first stage is isolation. Disable their communication and transportation. Make the target as deaf, dumb, and paralyzed as possible, setting them up for the second stage, synchronized chaos. Terrorize them with covert attacks and misinformation, overwhelming their defense capabilities, leaving their weapon systems vulnerable to extremists and our own military. Without a clear enemy or motive, people will start to turn on each other. And if done so successfully, the third stage will happen on its own. A coup d'etat, civil war, collapse. He goes on to mention that the program that he saw by one of his clients was considered to be the most cost-effective way to destabilize a country because if the target nation was dysfunctional enough, it would, in essence, do the work for you. And then he goes on to tell the characters, whoever started this wants us to finish it. Now, Leave the World Behind paints as comprehensive a picture of 21st century threats to America as any movie I've seen in quite some time, all while simultaneously resisting the need to provide explanations for any of it. And while I want to make it clear that this film never manages to reach the very high bar set by Jordan Peele's Get Out, it does feel like a more than thoughtful exploration of what may lie in store for us as Americans if we don't find a way to come together. But what do you guys think? Do you think Leave the World Behind was successful as a thought-provoking commentary on the current dysfunction in our country? Or do you simply think this was a failed attempt to make a Jordan Peele movie? Let me know in the comments. And for those of you who might be new to the channel, be sure to like and share this video. If you really like the content, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. That way you'll be notified when I drop a new video. Also, be sure to go check out themaskscreenwriter.com for more television and film reviews and info on my upcoming film projects. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I got screenplays to write. And I'll catch y'all on the next video.